Was an animal going to come out and be a part of the greeting process? I think the best question to ask is the first one you did, which is, what did you think was going to happen? Like, why would you be vague? Why would you not specify what was, why are you leaving this open to interpretation?
Like,
such
could have
that
said just animal.
Your daughter's.
Welcome to TBC Extra, a weekly podcast of our Sunday sermon and a little extra. I am Teresa Jenkins, the communications director here at Topeka Bible Church.
And I'm Jason Brent, the children's pastor at Topeka Bible Church, and we're glad you're here. And now for a little extra.
Hi, welcome into the studio. I am joined by my friend Jason.
Hello, Teresa.
We're having a good laugh today.
We're having it's a Seattle type day today.
It is a Seattle
I love
type
it.
day.
I love that I get to live in Seattle 3 or 4 times a year in Topeka.
In Topeka.
So,
It's very rainy.
Rainy and chilly, but not cold.
But it's perfect weather for giving super producer Peter a hard time, which is what we've been doing.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's the only day we do this.
Yes, on Seattle days or every Tuesday. Well, that's not what we wanted to talk about, though.
No,
we
well,
could,
that's
but
not
we
what
won't.
we're supposed to talk about.
It's not what we're supposed to talk about. Our sermon this week is going to talk about some rash promises or threats.
Yeah,
more like rash
probably
promises.
a whoopsie.
Yeah,
like I wish I
like,
could take this back kind of thing.
Take-backs.
No take backsies.
But there were take-backs. We'll talk about that during
Yes,
the third segment, the final segment when Connor is here. So we were going to talk about just our parenting, and because we're perfect parents, neither one of us have ever made those kinds of, I can't even get it out without laughing.
Right.
We've never made those mistakes. I'm thinking about our journey. Because Justin had never really thought about having kids when he married me with a 5-year-old son.
Yes. Instant parent.
Just had a wedding ring. He asked if we could take some classes.
Nice.
I
Good
was
job, Justin.
So impressed.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, yes. And I had a friend who was leading some love and logic classes.
Yes.
And so we got the book and we took the class and it helped. And, but one of the things was you give your child a choice and you have to be
Either
completely thrilled with whichever decision they make.
In punishment or in just in life?
About, if you do this, then you get to choose whether you do this or you do this. And we have to be equally thrilled.
So if you throw the book, you get to choose if you get to go to timeout or if you choose not to go.
Something like that.
Right.
And Aaron at that time, he didn't misbehave. Not that he does now, but so we didn't have to practice that a lot.
Right.
And so when we did, we weren't practiced very well.
Right.
It was like, well, you can either do this or you can watch television for an hour. And it's like, so it just, there were a few of those offers made during our
that you
early
wish,
parenting,
I really wish if I would have
years.
thought that through better, I wouldn't have made that offer.
We probably should have had like a list that we kept in our pockets.
I've been a parent for over 19 years. I'm probably due for a parenting class. I don't know if we've gone to a couple conferences and I don't think I've ever taken a parenting class. That's a good job for Justin. That's really awesome.
I commend him.
Oh man. Angie and I are like the perfect combination for this to go awry because I'm pretty laid back, but I like emotional in the moment. And she's like black and white and like by the book. So if I say, if you do that again, you're not going to get to play video games for a month, maybe don't really mean that for a whole month, I guess 30 or 31 days or 28 days if it's a February. Yeah. But Angie then is like locked in because she's like, no, we said a month.
At 2:35 p.m.
Yeah, right. But the problem is that most of the time, like the video game time, which is the most effective deterrent that we found at any parenting, discipline, or screen time.
Aaron didn't play video games, and so we could never use that.
Right.
That was maybe
Yes.
I don't
Yeah.
want to say we should have introduced video games.
No, I don't
'cause
think so. But if you had introduced for us, that was very effective,
didn't
especially
matter.
for
Yeah.
Athen and Enoch and Daxon. Anyway, so, but most of the time, the video game time, screen time, which we allowed 45 minutes a day of screen time, which was our rule when our kids were young, mostly like aided Angie to do dishes or like to not have to answer a million questions. So I was doling out the harsh punishment, but I wasn't really the one that had to make sure that it was followed through with. So, but one time specifically that I remember, I don't know if this is it was kind of a rash foul. So like Henley was pretty compliant almost all the time, but she was like right around 4 years old. And we were at my mother-in-law and father-in-law's house at the time, and she wanted an orange. And, of course, which grandma wouldn't say, sure, you can have an orange. Right. And so before when we were peeling the orange, before we gave it to her, Angie said, now say thank you. And Henley said, mm-mm. And I don't know what it was about this orange and thank you. She dug her heels in to the point where we were like, if you don't say thank you right now, we're leaving. And we were supposed to be there the whole evening.
She didn't.
And she would not do it. And I was like, oh my goodness. It's like, it's probably, like, it's not that big. Maybe she doesn't understand, but she understood. Like, she was very obvious. And even my mother-in-law was like, oh, no, that would just be totally no problem. But no, sure enough, we loaded up the kids and hightailed it out of there because, the next day, when Henley woke up, she said, thank you.
Oh,
but it was a little too late for that. But it was like, it was probably went on like almost an hour that we were trying to get her to say thank you. And it just didn't work out that way.
But you never, because she was so young, you never found out what was that obstacle for her?
No, she just said she didn't want to say thank you. She just got an obstinate disposition.
Which is so shocking since she was such a laid back.
Yeah, it was.
Child. Yeah,
very few times.
And courteous.
Yeah, very few times did anything like that happen, but it just happened to be. That's so fun,
and happened to be.
Yeah,
when you were with family. Well,
be careful what you say if you're gonna have to follow through. Let's
see, who else did you have in the home at the time? You had Athen. Just Athen.
Yeah.
So, you communicated to both of them that you were going to stand.
Oh, we certainly did
by those, and I think that's an important part of parenting.
To our in-laws that we weren't messing around.
Yeah, the phone call the next day. Could I suggest some other consequences?
Maybe
that don't involve us sacrificing time with you. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
and let's find out what the real rash promises.
Yes,
rash vow.
It's making me itchy just talking about it.
Yeah, this is an uncomfortable one. Let's get to it.
Well, if you're new with us this morning, we are continuing our series in the book of Judges here. And I would like to think, right, it would be a nice thought that all of us who are here, we would love to love Jesus even more, to have a deeper relationship with God. We would like to say that we love God, but I also think that most of us, if we're being honest, would also say that we're not entirely sure that we know God as well as we should. Now, there's a problem that comes about that many of us can recognize if we would say that we have a lack of love for God, but a great knowledge of Him, His purposes, His character. We'd say, well, that's a very empty kind of faith, right? It's all head knowledge. It's not in the heart. It's not embodied. We don't want to be people filled with knowledge with a lack of love. But what we often don't think about or talk about is that the opposite is also true. That you can have a great love and affection and passion for God and have a lack of knowledge about who he is, what he cares about, what his desires are, and that can also lead us into trouble. This morning in our study in Judges here, we'll mostly be in chapter 11, and this identity of loving God deeply but not knowing him well, knowing him poorly, that identity has a face, and his name is Jephthah. Jephthah is the next judge that we'll be looking at here. And Jephthah's story is one that, like many of them, begins very well but sort of fades down the back stretch. He ends up making a very poor decision that will define his life because in his passion, he did not know God as well as he ought to have. And so if you'll, I will say we're going to be mainly in Judges chapter 11. I'm going to wrap up some things in Judges chapter 10 that sort of springboard us into the main narrative. Because if you haven't been with us in the book of Judges, this might be new information. But for those of you that, you've been coming the last few weeks, most of these stories have to do with war. Right? Israel is fighting against somebody. Israel has rejected God once again, and God has, for most of the stories, raised up a leader, a judge, to help deliver Israel from their enemies. And it's this cycle, but you've also seen that this cycle continues to degrade. It gets worse over time. Israel's faith continues to struggle more and more. They don't just return to God the same way they did previously. Well, we see a break in Judges chapter 10 where God says to them, "Go cry out to the gods you've chosen. Let them save you." Right? Now, if you or I, we were God, this probably would have been the first time Israel came to us, this is what we would have said to them. God in his mercy, though, his long-suffering nature, his passion for his people, he has continued to deliver them from their enemies. And right now, in this story, the Ammonites are coming against Israel. There's actually a pronged attack, two-pronged attack. One is coming from the east with Ammon, and the other one is coming from the west, the Philistines. Next week, Jim is going to talk about Samson, a character that many of you might be familiar with, who fought against the Philistines. But Jephthah is going to fight against the Ammonites, and that's the difficulty they're facing right now is they're oppressed by this group. God says this to them. In Israel, they respond well. It's the first time in the book of Judges they say, "We've sinned, God. We've really messed up." And they put away their false gods and they rededicate themselves to the Lord. But it says in chapter 10, it says God is tired of their misery. Right? Which is such a powerful statement, right? God is tired of seeing them walk through this again and again and again. But the other thing that happens in chapter 10 is that the leaders of Gilead, who are the main people that are being attacked and oppressed by the Ammonites, the leaders of Gilead, they have a leadership vacuum in that they can't find anybody in their land who is bold enough, faithful enough, all of the different things, to lead them in battle against the Ammonites. They're stuck. They don't have a way out. They've got some people who, they're political leaders, if you will, like they're local tribal leaders, but they're like, we need somebody to pick up the sword against Ammon. They can't find anyone. And so they're going to turn to a very unlikely individual, somebody that they frankly don't even have the rights to ask because of how they have treated him previously. Jephthah is an outcast from the Gileadite community, and yet they're going to turn to him in their hour of need. As Judges chapter 11 begins, we're introduced to Jephthah. He is the Gileadite who is a valiant warrior, but he was the son of a prostitute, and Gilead was his father. Gilead's wife bore him sons, and when they grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You will have no inheritance in our father's family because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tov. Then some worthless men joined Jephthah and went on raids with him. So we see that old Jay has a few similarities to our figure from last week, Abimelech. They are warriors, primarily. They are illegitimate sons. They are at odds with their brothers. And they are the leaders of kind of a rough group of people. But this is where the similarities stop, because Jephthah is going to cut a much different character than Abimelech last week. Jephthah is a man of deep, deep faith. We'll see that multiple times in this story. Jephthah is a man who does love God, and that's precisely what makes this story so sobering, is the problem is not going to be his heart or his passion for God. The problem is going to be his theology, what he believes about God that is true. But the rulers of Gilead, they don't care one lick for most of those things. They want a guy who can pick up a sword and can help lead them against the Ammonites, and they're mostly just interested in his ability to fight. So they go to him. Once the Ammonites eventually attack and they make war with Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. They said to him, "Come, be our commander, and let's fight the Ammonites." Now you put yourself in the position of Jephthah, who, though the brothers in the story are the ones who have rejected him, it would have been affirmed and approved by these leaders, right? They are complicit in his rejection from the community and being in exile, right, in the land of Tob. And so Jephthah here, we would say he has all the leverage. They are the guy that Jephthah is the guy that they want. And he has been rejected, and they are desperate, and so he's going to use that to haggle a little bit out his position. He replies to the elders, "Didn't you hate me and drive me out of my father's family? Why then have you come to me now when you're in trouble?" It's a good question. They answered Jephthah, "That's true, that is true, but now we turn to you. Come with us, fight the Ammonites, and you will become leader of all the inhabitants of Gilead." And so, backed into a corner, the rulers sweeten the pot. Originally, they came to him and they said, "Will you lead us in battle?" And then Jephthah pushes back and they go, "Okay, you can be the leader of all of us, right? You can have it all. You can rule the whole region if you would just come and fight for us." So Jephthah says to them, "If you are bringing me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me, I will be your leader." The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord is our witness if we don't do as you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead. The people made him their leader and commander, and Jephthah repeated all his terms in the presence of the Lord at Mizpah. So here's the first sign that we get that Jephthah is a different kind of character than Abimelech, because though he's shrewd in these negotiations, there's nothing really bad about what he's doing. And furthermore, when he gets the first opportunity, he says, "You know what? The Lord is going to be the one who determines what happens here. It's not going to be me. It's not going to be, my ability, my skill, or any of these things. If the Lord wills that this should happen, well, then it's going to happen." And then he reaffirms that later in the local town. You might notice also that the people, they don't even wait for him to win any battles. They're just like, "You can be the leader now. That'd be great." So Jephthah is sort of in this conditional position, right? He has been elevated. He's been brought back home like a phoenix. He is rising from the ashes, right? He's this sort of reluctant hometown hero that has been brought back to fight against the Ammonites. And in his faith and his boldness, he stepped into this role, and he said, "The Lord is going to be the one who makes these decisions." This is a low bar to clear, but Jephthah, more than any other judge in this book of the Bible, uses God's name more. Jephthah uses the Lord's name more than any other judge in this book of the Bible. Despite his rough background, what he had been doing previously, he's a man of faith, and we need to understand that. But in order for all of these things to come true, right, for him to sit on this position of leadership and maintain it, he has to defeat the Ammonites first. And they are, though we haven't talked about them much, like many countries that Israel is going to fight against, they are bigger, they are better equipped, they have the advantage, they've been ruling over Israel for quite some time. This is another underdog story. But because God is in his side, we don't really have those same questions. The first thing that Jephthah is going to do, as the leader of the Gileadites, is he's going to enter into negotiations with the Ammonite ruler. Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites. And I'm going to skip the long negotiation that they get into as they trade letters back and forth. But we see a few things emerge about Jephthah that tell us his character, his wisdom in battle, and in particular, that he is a leader who understands the power of God. He'll go through and explain to the Ammonite king, fighting back. Basically, they have claims to land that they're arguing about. And what Jephthah says is he goes back through Israel's history, and he's like, actually, we have claims to this land that sort of predate what you're saying here. We have rights to where we are. You're wrong. But the best and most stirring statement that he will make in this negotiation with a superpower to the east is he says, let the Lord, who is the judge, decide today between the Israelites and the Ammonites. He plays into this idea that the king of Ammon will say that, well, and especially during this time in history, they believe that each nation's fortunes are led and defined by their particular God. And so what Jephthah says to the king of Ammon, and he's like, rely on your God, and I'll rely on mine, and we'll see who comes out in the wash, basically. And it's a bold statement because from an earthly perspective, there's no real reason that Jephthah should have confidence in this battle. Same kind of things that you've heard before in this story of Judges, right? Fewer men, worse position, they're having to attack a fortified enemy, all these different things, right? And yet Jephthah says, let the Lord, who is the judge, decide today between the two of us. This is also the high point of Jephthah's story. He is confidently putting faith in the Lord as the true judge into God's sovereign hand. Despite Jephthah's confidence, though, we shouldn't be surprised that the Ammonite king says, yeah, I'll take my chances, right? He doesn't care about the Lord. And so the king of Ammon would not listen to Jephthah's message that he sent them. And this means war. So they're going to go to war now. And this is what the elders of Gilead had been anticipating. This is why Jephthah is there, because he can lead them into battle. But the story is now going to take a huge turn. We would be expecting the rest of the narrative to continue. How are we going to fight against the Ammonites? What's going to happen? Most of the stories in Judges have given us a lot of detail in the battles, especially the last few we've looked at. But there's going to be a big shift here, and we look at something that's going to happen in Jephthah's home before he goes out to battle. The Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah. He made this vow to the Lord. If you will indeed hand over to me the sons of Ammon, then whatever comes out the doors of my house to meet me when I return safely from the sons of Ammon, it shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Okay, so we see that much in the same way that previous judges have been strengthened. The Spirit of the Lord sort of envelops them, descends on them, empowers them, and enables them to go out and do all the things that God has intended for them to do, right? The Spirit of the Lord coming upon Jephthah is the assurance of his victory, all right? God hasn't spoken much in Judges chapter 11 here, but this is where we see that God approves of what Jephthah is doing and that he is going to be the judge, right? The next judge for Israel, that savior role, that leader role, and that he is going to be successful in fighting back the Ammonites. Despite that, and we don't know, was Jephthah aware that the Spirit of the Lord descended on him? Should he have been? What was going on here? But despite that assurance that the reader understands, Jephthah makes this rash vow. And I have it in italics here because the NASB version is just a much better translation of what is said here. Long story short, there's just some nuance in the language that the CSB, which is what we typically use, doesn't contain. And Jephthah just It's a weird oath that he makes. What he's doing is he's making a vow or an oath to God, which is not unusual in the sense that throughout history, and in fact, even in the Mosaic Law, there's an understanding for if you want to make a vow, which is kind of going over and above this additional thing that you can do to God, there's a way that you do it, there's a thing, this is not an unusual practice. What is unusual is what he says he's going to do with the vow or how he's going to fulfill it. And he uses very ambiguous language, like anything that will come out of my house is going to be offered up, but he is very clear on one point. I will offer it up to you as a burnt offering. People have spilled a lot of ink trying to get into the mind and motivations of Jephthah here, because this is a critical mistake. Why would you make this promise? Why would you do this? True, right? The Israelites have a system of sacrifices that they're supposed to follow that do include burnt offerings, but none of them look or sound like this oath that he just made. It's like he began to write his own worship style. Right? This is never what God commands, the way that he's framing this. This is never something that God desires. This is not a way in any part of the Old Testament that God's people are supposed to worship him or devote things to him, okay? And so because of this, we are met with the two things here, because the Spirit of the Lord is on Jephthah, and because of this rash vow, we're met with this very uncomfortable truth, which is that this vow that he has made that is rash, that is unwise, that is unfitting for somebody who is following after God, it is also completely unnecessary. Jephthah would be successful in his battle against the Ammonites without it, but much like Gideon, on the eve of battle, he enters into this new oath. Now, the story is going to briefly switch back to the battle against the Ammonites, but you can tell that the story has made a turn already because this entire war is wrapped up in 2 verses. Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord handed them over to him. He defeated 20 of their cities with a great slaughter from Aroer all the way to the entrance of Minnith and to Abel Keramim. So the Ammonites were subdued before the Israelites. That's the yay. Yay, right? The Ammonites are defeated, right? They're pushed back. Jephthah was a successful judge. Absent what we're talking about here, this vow that he made, he fulfilled God's desire. This is the purpose that he is there for. In his faith, he has done this thing. It is amazing. It's really special what he's done. He takes over these 20 cities against the Ammonites and pushes back the bad guys. And so his victory, his role as judge and deliverer, in fact, even being the ruler of Gilead, all of that is fulfilled. And we want to celebrate with him, but naturally we're all waiting for him to get back home. When Jephthah went to his home in Mizpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him with tambourines and dancing. She was his only child. He had no other son or daughter beside her. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "No, not my daughter. You have devastated me. You have brought great misery on me. I have given my word to the Lord and cannot take it back." In joy, Jephthah's only child, his daughter, who we don't know her name, comes out to greet him, and in doing so, she becomes the object of his sacrifice, because he had said, whoever comes out or whatever comes out to greet me will be this burnt offering. And his horror tells us that this was never the intended outcome, but you're also asking this question, what were you thinking was going to happen? Why would you even put your household, including your daughter, in danger here? We're asking all of these questions, and our heart is breaking here too, because now Jephthah he begins to blame his daughter for what happens. What he's saying to her about, "You have devastated me, you've brought great misery on me," that's directed to her. Well, it's not her fault what has happened. And then Jephthah says, "I have given my word to the Lord and cannot take it back." Jephthah feels caught between a rock and a hard place, right? To say the least. That's such an understatement. He feels trapped, and he is right that God takes vows seriously, but he is wrong that there is no way out. The Mosaic covenant, if he knew it, has a law and a provision for what you should do when you make a rash vow or when somebody has been dedicated and they need to be redeemed. Essentially, he could pay a certain amount of money and it would have the same effect. But the technical aspect is not the importance. The bigger deal here is that he simply doesn't know that. He doesn't know what the law has commanded. He doesn't know what God truly desires. In his ignorance, even his passion and his zeal and his love for God, he has stepped into a major blunder. And now, because of this devotion that he has to God, but a lack of knowledge, he is going to continue through with his plan. It is an unbelievably tragic situation, right? Because his ignorance, more than anything, is going to condemn his daughter. Then the daughter said to Jephthah, "My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, for the Lord brought vengeance on your enemies, the Ammonites." She also said to her father, "Let me do this one thing. Let me wander 2 months through the mountains with my friends and mourn my virginity." Mourning the fact that she's never going to be able to have a family, to have a future, to have a legacy. Her father is going to, in his misguided devotion to God, her father is going to take that from her. What's also sad here is that Jephthah's daughter, like a number of other unnamed women in the book of Judges, is going to, ironically, exemplify great faith. Jephthah's daughter doesn't understand what's wrong about this situation, and what we see her doing, which sort of blows the mind, is she trusts in her dad. She trusts that he is leading her towards God, that this vow that he has made is right and good, okay? And so she goes, "Don't go back on your word against the Lord." Now we're screaming as we're reading this, going, "You don't have to do this. This doesn't have to be the way that it ends," but it's going to be the way that it ends. We're drawn towards this conclusion, kicking and screaming. "Go," Jephthah says, and he sent her away 2 months. She left with her friends and mourned her virginity as she wandered through the mountains. At the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, and he kept the vow that he had made about her. And she had never been intimate with a man. Now it became a custom in Israel that 4 days each year, the young women of Israel would commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. He kept the vow that he made about her. Does a lot of heavy lifting in this passage. You can imagine what that means. We are told that her memory was not forgotten. Right? The legacy that she was mourning was remembered by the women of Israel, which gives us some kind of sense that other people were looking at this situation and seeing it as a tragedy. 4 days each year, the young women of Israel would commemorate the daughter of Jephthah, the Gileadite. This is the end of Judges chapter 11. And there's one small thing that Jephthah's story continues in at the beginning of chapter 12. But basically, this is the end of his story. He defeated the Ammonites. He was the judge for Israel. He did great things in God's name. He had a great faith in God. Don't miss that, right? This is not a man who is just using the Lord's name in vain. Like, he truly, genuinely thought what he was doing was good. But his lack of understanding has led to a postscript that is horrible. And so the end of his story is an unmarked grave. It says at the end in chapter 12, Jephthah judged Israel 6 years, and when he died, he was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. That's it. It's the end of Jephthah's story. When he died, he was buried in one of the cities of Gilead. So, look, this is a bit of a downer as far as stories go. Right? This is, like we have seen in the book of Judges, a continuation of Israel's degradation, right? Their faith in God, their theology, their understanding of who he is has continued to erode over the generations. And this and the stories that are coming up as we wrap up the book of Judges, this is the fruit of that. All right? This is what happens when you, in this time, in this place, when you have a great love for God but don't know what he stands for. It's a tragedy that we look at Jephthah's story, and to be honest with you, there isn't much that redeems his individual narrative. There's one piece of information I'll tell you at the very end that gives us some hope, but otherwise it's just Jephthah doing his best and yet walking into this huge mistake. So he loves God. Let's talk about this. What does it mean for us, right? Jephthah loves God. There's no question about that. Somewhere along the way, though, his understanding of who God is and what God wants has become distorted. And in that misunderstanding, in that ignorance, right, his passion pushed him forward, led him into a kind of worship that God never asked for. And what is so tricky about this is that until the worst came and he is mourning his daughter, right, he probably felt that everything was going right. He had done something tragic and yet probably believed that it was exactly what he should have been doing. This is more common than we'd like to admit, where it is possible to be deeply sincere, genuinely devoted to God, and entirely wrong about what pleases him. Emotion can drive us forward. It is God-given. It is good. But emotions alone, right? And superficial statements of faith, you know, the kind of faith that only exists in the verse of the day, right? This sort of faith that loves God passionately, loves the idea of being close to him, can say many of the right things on the surface, but lacks that depth. When we are driven by emotion, we can sometimes be confused into thinking that it alone can tell us what is good. Dr. Jim Fain says, emotions report the temperature of one's soul as it interacts with circumstance, but they do not tell us how we ought to live. It is easy to be driven by emotion and passion and zeal, especially if you are new to the faith, right? To understand that Christ has died for your sins, that he died on that cross so that we might live, and we walk into this new faith and we are excited about what it represents and what it means, and this new relationship, this restored relationship that we have with God. But there is something deeper to be had, because that emotion and that zeal cannot carry you forever. It cannot be the thing alone on which your faith rests. The writer of the book of Hebrews spoke about this same situation in the New Testament as he was writing to the church. And he has this to say: "For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk, not solid food, for everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child." Jephthah's story is a picture of what it looks like to never move beyond a passionate but shallow understanding of God. And the people closest to him paid the price for that. Understand, right? There's collateral damage here. It is not your faith, my faith. It is not just an individual pursuit. It affects those around us, especially those in whom we have great influence. "For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God." The church has never had a shortage of passionate people throughout history. Never lacked people who had great zeal and affection for God. The church often lacks people with a depth of faith, formed individuals, those who have pursued the deeper things of their relationship with God, unsatisfied by the superficial faith that frankly affects many in the Western world. This idea of being culturally Christian, socially acceptable Christian, the Christianity that sounds great until it is tested. The faith that stands on its own until a child or a grandchild or a coworker or somebody at your bridge club asks you, why do you love Jesus? And you don't have an answer to that question. Many of you saw recently during the Winter Olympics, the USA men's and women's hockey team take gold. Pretty awesome. Both of them defeated their bitter rival Canada in overtime, 2-1. And when you watch that and you watch those stories, and you've probably seen the pictures and heard the interviews and all of those things, I mean, of course, the first thing is just the USA chant just starts pumping in your head. But beyond that, you know, once you get through the patriotic notion of just beating a bitter rival on the world stage, my thought in this message goes to, what kind of devotion do these athletes have to be able to compete on this stage? Because if you heard some of them talk, they would list out the athletes, the hockey players that inspired them when they were kids. I had a poster of Wayne Gretzky or Sidney Crosby on the wall, right? Like I was excited. I wanted to be more like them. But they're across the nation, in Canada and the US both, there are a host of people who have a passion for hockey. There are a host of people who have no problem saying that it's a great sport and they love it and they want to give everything to it, but you don't get to be on that ice wearing the gold medal unless you've gone deeper with your devotion. It's not a superficial thing. And there is a similar call upon your life that, far be it from hockey, is not reliant in any way on a skill issue. There's not a single one of you who can say that you are unable to draw deeper into your relationship with God. I cannot make that excuse of myself. At any point in time, empowered by the Spirit, I can draw deeper into my relationship with God. My roots can go further. I can be better prepared for the storms, to the answers, to the things of life, but also for my own sake. I can have a better understanding of God's grace and mercy. The thing which I love, the thing which drives my passion, can be better informed by my knowledge of God. So what I'm advocating here is not some kind of like empty faith like of the Pharisees where they knew a lot about God but did not truly love Him. Rather, what I'm saying is that you can have both at the same time. That you can love God and know Him, and both of those can run as deep as you want them to. Now, this is, at the same time, a difficult thing to pin down, because the way that you become deeper is not necessarily by doing the rote memorization. It is not just by reading more of the Bible or praying for 6 minutes instead of 4. Those things are good. Those things are a fruit of a life that draws deeper. But ultimately, it requires you recognizing, first and foremost, that the superficial faith will not last, and that you want to prepare yourself for the hard times, for the difficult things, for the times of testing, and that you are going to take intentional steps to get there. I can't give you all the steps, but I do have a couple for you this morning. But first, I have a slide that I forgot, which is a reminder of the things I just said. Don't be a person who loves God deeply and knows Him poorly. If you come to the second service, I might nail that transition, but back to the application here. What are some things practically that you can do? Commit to reading the book of Matthew in March. You know what? For a lot of us, our reading of the Bible is superficial. And we can even fall into the trap of saying, well, my relationship with God, it isn't just about how much I read. But that is kind of the rationale reserved for those who read the Bible a lot. If you have no interaction with God's word, right? If you are just relying upon me to tell you what it says, you have a hole in your faith that needs to be filled by, as the writer of Hebrews said, the word of righteousness, to be trained in it, to take the deeper things, the meat instead of the milk. Today's March 1st. There are 28 chapters in the book of Matthew. And so you can miss 3 days and you can still read one chapter every day and you can get through the book of Matthew. Number 2 is there's a podcast, if you like that, named Truth and Love, which is made by ACBC, the Association of Certified Biblical Counselors. But they had a podcast that came out this past week that said, what's wrong with living by emotions? And they talk about this exact thing in a much broader, longer context. How do you walk through suffering and not be driven only by emotions in your faith? It's a great resource for you to check out. You can also read, if you're into books, The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. I'll let you in. He goes pretty deep. This is a little bit more of the deep end than listening to a podcast, but it's good, rich instruction from a man of faith in the 20th century who definitely had a deep relationship with God. If you want a more contemporary book that you could read, Deeper by Dane Ortland is a book that I'm reading through right now, and I'm really enjoying just in part of my personal devotion. This is not all of it, but this is part of it. Really what we're talking about with Jephthah is this, what I said before, that we don't want to be a person who loves God deeply but knows him poorly. We want to be people who what? Love God deeply and know him deeply. And that will take intention on your part. It is not legalism to say that it requires discipline and purpose to go deeper in your relationship with God. It is okay to say that effort is needed if we want to have more than a surface level understanding of who God is and what he has done. Now, finally, let me tell you this. If you are feeling perhaps a little beat down by what is a tragic story, and you are thinking, well, what about Jephthah? Jephthah appears again in Hebrews chapter 11, in what is typically referred to as the Hall of Faith. And it is a list of people throughout the Bible's history who are recognized for having a great faith in God. In the book of Judges, there are some broken people in that list who have stories that do not inspire confidence, and yet their faith they made it into the list, and Jephthah is one of them. Jephthah is included in Hebrews chapter 11. God has recognized him for his faith. And so I don't want you to be discouraged if you go, I love God, but I don't feel like I know him well. Brother and sister, the Lord is still using you and desires for you to continue doing things in his kingdom. Just also understand that there's a greater pasture for you to walk into in your faith with God. There's more to be done, not just because it is what you have been told to do, but because there is joy on the other side of knowing God more deeply. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you today and we thank you. We thank you for your word, this word of righteousness that instructs us, the ability for us to hear it and understand, frankly, learn from the mistakes of others, but Lord, also to remember that we make these same mistakes ourselves. And yet, God, in your grace, in your mercy, you walk with us through them. You shepherd us through these valleys and these hills, and you have called us to something greater. God, we ask that by the power of your Spirit, help us to dig deep, to drill down, to not be satisfied with a superficial faith, so that in the time of testing, in the time of need, Lord, we will show ourselves to be faithful, to be understanding of your word, and to be a people who are calling upon you in a correct and right way. There's beauty in that, Lord. Let us see these things, most of all, through Jesus Christ, as he has provided the perfect sacrifice for us. It's in his name we pray. Amen.
We are back in the studio.
Yay!
I'm hanging on to that sermon and the story.
Yeah.
this is just so unbelievable.
Yeah. Definitely need to pick me up. I mean, some of these stories are just, and it's a good thing that we've only got a few weeks left here. Not because I don't enjoy the Judges series, but it feels like you can only take so many of these.
How much more can we take?
Yeah, we'll have a break here, if you will,
For Easter.
Well,
for Good Friday.
Samson is the next 2 weeks. And we'll take his life in two parts, and that, I mean, there are bad things there too, but that's more.
This isn't going to be the felt board Sunday school version of it.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah.
The truth.
But then the last 2 weeks are actually when the hardest stuff comes, and that'll be when.
Thanks for again giving us a heads up about those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Well, you brought some stuff.
I did
to take us a little deeper, a little further.
Yeah. So I entirely skipped over this. Oh, for those who are following along and reading in their Bibles these stories, they probably come in on Sunday or afterwards and like, man, he skipped a lot of the story. But I'm trying. It's sort of like skipping a stone on the water, like on a pond. You just have to get across to the other side and try and hit as many things as you can. And so one of the parts that we skipped was not essential to the story. It was the details of Jephthah's negotiations with the king of Ammon. And it's probably, if we're saying that he was a capable leader and a discerning leader and a good tactician, I mean, all these different things that I said in the message, the parts that I included didn't really speak to that. But the negotiations are really where you see he's pretty shrewd. Mm-hmm. And he has essentially three arguments to the king of Ammon. One is that Jephthah traces Israel's history and how this territory that they're in, that they have occupied, because what's going on is Ammon is trying to take territory back from Israel. Mm-hmm. Okay. So they're still being oppressed, but Israel occupies the territory. And Jephthah goes, well, we've had this for hundreds of years. And he goes back through Israel's history. And it really shows that Ammon basically had no claim on Gilead, but also that Jephthah, knew his history book. Like he was, and this is, it kind of depends what your timeline is here, but this would be like us recounting events from the Revolutionary War. Like it's back there a bit, and yet he knows some really specific details. Now he presumably has these things written down or has been passed down because it's the stories of Moses and Joshua, but still, Jephthah knew what he was talking about. And so he makes kind of a geographical claim. The second one is really curious, is that we said a high point of Jephthah's ministry or his life was, and a great moment of faith was that he invoked God as the judge, right? Mm-hmm. God is the one who will determine basically who gets this land. I left out the part, though, where Jephthah mentions to the king of Ammon, he references their God, and which in this case is Chemosh. And he says, well, if Chemosh is the one who is, great or whatever, well, then you'll win. Like, why, basically, why are you concerned here? And so Jephthah sort of plays into this idea of that proxy type of warfare. What we would, I think, like to see is somebody just going, God is the judge. He will handle all these others are false gods. But he either because he believes that the king of Ammon and that, Chemosh has this role to play and all of those things, or is he being shrewd? Is he sort of like playing into the hand of Ammon and inciting him into this conflict?
Oh, if you believe, just come on over.
Let's see. It's not going to be a problem for you.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, if you think Chemosh is great, like come on down. Sort of like what Gideon's dad did, right? When he's like, hey, if you think Baal, he can fight for himself here.
Yeah.
Right.
So same conversation.
Similar thing. I know we're jumping ahead in the Bible. Elijah on Mount Carmel.
Yeah.
Carmel.
Carmel.
Yeah. Man, I got hungry for a second.
But that where he's talking with the prophets and he says,
he says,
call
your God.
Call your God.
Right.
Yeah, it's again, you're left going, we've got what we've got. He says it. Why is he saying it? We don't know entirely. There are some people who think that the whole negotiation process that he went through, this sending back and forth messengers, was really just a front so that he could gather his troops. Because this would take,
take time.
Honestly, it could take
stalling
months.
kind of.
And I think there's something to that because some people say he should have never anticipated that Ammon would actually accept a peace deal when they're the smaller force and all these
I feel
things.
like that happens all the time, though, even in current days. But,
The
modern warfare.
The third part is just it's almost more funny, but Jephthah points out, he's like, the Ammonites have not tried to take this land for 300 years. And he's like, so why are you doing it now? Like, you haven't laid claim to this. It's not like you are really the one who can show the receipt, right? Because there have been generations and generations and generations who've never brought up this claim. So basically, settle down. Anyhow, all that being said, he shows himself to be really capable. Whether the negotiations were in good faith or more of a tactic, he brings up good points. He's intelligent. And though the Ammonites reject his messengers and go to war, he's the only judge who has at least feigned an interest in diplomacy. I mean, everybody else is like, sword, ready. And Jephthah goes to that second. Whatever that's worth.
Good at diplomacy, maybe bad at making vows.
One could say. One could say
his daughter would have said.
He could be better. Yes. Yeah.
But okay, so he's come home and the daughter comes running out. I can't imagine what went through his heart.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
During that moment.
Yeah.
And when he had to, I assume there was a wife or wives to have to explain that to her mother.
Yeah.
This is what I have to do. I assume this is all happening. I'm seeing this through 2026
I think that's a good
lenses.
assumptions.
Those feelings. Could he, we know he should have, could he have, if something devastating, we made a bad choice, we would go to our pastor I would hope, to say, hey, I really need your wise counsel for this. Could he have done that with one of the Levite priests?
Like parlay you take to the captain?
Yeah. That's a good question. Two pieces to it. On the one hand, I mean, you never, here in a few weeks, we'll see a priest who sort of claims that he follows God appears in a story that's related to Moses. But setting that aside, it's not a good example because there haven't really been any faithful priests that have shown up. There's not really any reference to like systematic worship, to celebrating the feasts, you just get this sense that Israel's faith is really hollow. It certainly is not the robust, specific kind of like we're doing this at this date type of faith that we see, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, even to Deuteronomy. So on the one hand, it's almost a question into silence because you're saying, could he have gone to the people who are not showing up anywhere? It doesn't seem like anybody's talking to priests. None of them become characters. On the other hand, though, we've seen priests of other faiths, like Gideon's dad, right, was the not necessarily a priest, but he owned the land that the cult had the temple on. So you presume there was a guy there that was running it,
participating in some way. Yeah.
But even stronger than that, actually, if you get out of the book of Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, the character of Samuel, a lot of people believe that he was a contemporary of Samson, of Jephthah, of these guys. And they're just in different areas. And to make a long story short, Samuel's story involves, his mother, Hannah, who can't have children, going to the priest and praying to God and then dedicating her child to Eli. And so the priests were around. Apparently, there's some faithful people here who've maintained a devotion to the Lord and are following after him in true faith, not a sort of facsimile of that. And but yeah, you go with Jephthah. Like, why didn't he seek them out? Did he? And we just don't know about it. It doesn't seem like they are main characters.
You also see Eli as somebody that thought Hannah was drunk when she was praying.
Yeah,
a priest that didn't realize she was praying. And then also not take care of his son. I mean, not be a good parent to his sons.
Yeah, Eli's a bit of a complicated figure. He has some really good moments with Samuel, and then he has some not great moments with his personal ministry there. But I think even in the wash, though, Eli comes out as somebody who does love the Lord. He's not really like.
I just think he wasn't like the most. It didn't seem like he was the most spiritually like amazing person guiding in the priesthood at that time.
That's true. I think this is a pretty low bar to clear during the time of Judges that we've got somebody who's,
Just the fact that the Israelites were calling for judges and then later the kings, it shows where they were placing the priority. It feels like the priests are down here.
Yeah.
And, judges here. True. Oh, and kings are even better than that.
Yeah.
That was it just probably didn't occur to him because that wouldn't have been a practice for him to go.
I mean, we wish.
Consult. Well, we don't know.
Yeah. But also I'm like, was there, okay, I guess in some ways, not like, I guess you could say, well, he made a vow. He knew he was supposed to stick with it. Like, wouldn't anyone else be like, are you sure that God would really want that type of vow to be carried out?
Yeah, but think just a couple of weeks ago to Gideon. Yes, to your question. You the whole time you're asking, well, how did this happen? But like Gideon, he has a private interaction with the Lord. The testing of fleece is a private interaction with the Lord. Like, it's not like many of these guys are having these really public, experiences is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a pretty private thing. It appears it was. It doesn't sound like Jephthah's daughter even knew about his vow until later. Yeah. Teresa, you brought this up. Like, we get no mention of a spouse. What's going on there?
If she'd have known about it, probably wouldn't have run out to see him.
You're right.
Probably.
I think
just
so.
saying.
I think that's a safe assumption.
But what did he think was?
Yeah.
What did he think was going to happen?
Yeah. Were there goats living in the house, and
or
you
a
thought
dog,
maybe an
or
animal
some sort of
would come out?
kangaroo
So
that
I
he
used
was
the
his pet?
NASB version in the sermon because there are two things that are very important about his vow, and you have to kind of figure out what you make of them. The first one is actually at the end, which is he explicitly says this thing is going to be a burnt offering. He uses that phrase. Okay. So it's going to be a burnt offering to the Lord, which puts it into a category, right? It's not
Something
just like,
living.
I'm not devoting it to God necessarily. There's a process to it. But the other thing is that the specific word in Hebrew that he's using here, it's ambiguous. It is essentially something. So people have, the CSB, I think, renders it incorrectly where it says, I'd have to pull it up here, but basically it goes ahead and supplies the word human. Like, well, it's inferring that he meant human. And that could be true. Again, you're asking this question, what did you think was going to happen? So it could very well be true that that's what he meant, which leads us further into the category of people saying, well, Jephthah was, overly influenced by Canaanite practices,
other gods
and all these other gods. And so that was what he was thinking. But the original language there, it could have been an animal. It could have been a human. It could have been a thing. But then he clarifies and he says, when it comes out of my house to greet me.
Yeah.
So then there's another group of people who are going, well, obviously his reaction when his daughter comes out is horror.
Yeah.
So that wasn't his intent. Is there some way here that we can work in that he thought an animal, is living in his, which a lot of people did back then. They had animals a lot nearer their living quarters than we do today. And so was an animal going to come out and be a part of the greeting process? I think the best question to ask is the first one you did, which is, what did you think was going to happen?
Right.
Like, why would you be vague? Why would you not specify why are you leaving this open to interpretation?
Like,
such
could have
that
said just animal.
your daughter is one of the
Right.
possibilities.
Yeah, right.
And so,
Yes, as intentional as he was about other things, all the negotiations and all that, why would this be the thing that you would just
the
leave
best thing
open?
I like to think you have to, as you're going through the story, you have to put Jephthah into some sort of moral category.
Yeah.
And I like putting him into the category I made a choice in the sermon.
Yeah.
He is a faithful individual who was ignorant and did his best essentially. And so I put him into the category of kind of like somebody today who would make a vow to God, on a snap sort of thing and say, like, God, like if you would take away my addiction, I want to quit smoking, or I want to quit looking at this, or I want to stop this habit. like the next thing that somebody says to me, or the first song,
I'll move to Africa.
But like leaves it open to interpretation. You go like the next billboard sign that I see, or the next person that I encounter, I'm going to do this. You just sort of leave it open to this, God, whatever you would want to have happen.
Which
that's
on the one hand is a good posture to have. God, as you will it.
As you will,
which is
Lord.
what he wanted to do when he was thinking about leading the army, right? I mean, he wanted to make sure God was with him when he was in battle.
Yeah, that's a whole nother angle here is what was Jephthah? Why did Jephthah even make this vow in the first place? Is it devotion to the Lord? Is it negotiation? I mean, with the leaders of the Gileadites, with the king of the Ammonites, and then actually into chapter 12 with the leaders of the tribe of Ephraim. Jephthah talks a lot. In fact, his name means like open or to open. And in the Hebrew, the word that is being used for his negotiations is basically like opening his mouth.
Was he negotiating with God?
That's part of the question here. Is
I
like,
will
is
sacrifice
he doing
whatever
it?
comes
I'll do
out of my
a
house.
conditional sort of thing. I'll do this if you do this. Some people say that's a bribe. Some people say he's negotiating. No matter what, it doesn't look great, but you can see how there's a whole range of possible motivations for him here, and levels of intelligence, right? All the way from it's going to be a human sacrifice and I just didn't want it to be my daughter to it could be anything. It could be an animal and the horror.
Maybe his house servant is the one who customarily is the first to greet him, and he thought, I can sacrifice that.
Yeah,
that person.
Which even still leaves us going.
That's the person.
I think no matter what,
and the sacrifice wasn't necessary.
What flow chart you follow, you're still going. It wasn't necessary.
It was,
and that's the part that hurts.
That is that's
since
the
we're
point.
saying we're leaving that open to interpretation, is there any room for interpretation to like say, well, he fulfilled the vow?
Oh yeah,
like maybe he did fulfill the law to get out of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
so
is there a chance that she didn't die?
Two questions there. First one is, did he fulfill the law, or could he have fulfilled the law? And second is maybe what does the text say about his daughter? Right. Okay. So first things first, what I mentioned during the sermon, he could have gotten out of this. So God has a provision in the Mosaic law. There's actually two possible places that you could go to for this. One is that the Lord in Leviticus 27 clarifies the specific financial price that must be paid to redeem, and that's a particular word in the law, to redeem somebody or something that has been vowed to the Lord. So a vow has been made to the Lord to dedicate this thing, and if that thing should or could no longer be dedicated to the Lord, there is a specific price that is paid back into, in this case, like the tabernacle, to redeem it. Now, God actually invokes this a couple times. So in Exodus chapter 13, this also happens in Numbers chapter 18, but in Exodus 13, the Lord spoke to Moses, this is verse 1, consecrate every firstborn male to me, the firstborn from every womb among the Israelites, both man and domestic animal. It is mine. And as we keep going there, God will clarify, okay, so firstborn humans and firstborn animals are both dedicated to him. They belong to him. This even stretches back to the 10th plague in Egypt and the owning the firstborn. But anyhow, then he talks about, he uses the example of donkeys. And he's like, okay, so the firstborn donkey belongs to me and it must be given to me. Basically, it's going to be a sacrifice, okay? But then when he gets to kids, in verse 13, he says, you must redeem every firstborn of a donkey with a flock animal. But if you do, so firstborn of a donkey can be substituted with, essentially we're swapping out the financial cost for another flock animal. So you're paying.
Like a goat?
Yeah, or sheep or something like that. So you're paying the cost for you to keep your donkey. And then he says, however, you must redeem every firstborn among your sons. All that being said, God specifically commands Israel. He says, you must dedicate your firstborn children to me, but I will not allow you to do what the other nations do and sacrifice them. So that means that for your firstborn, there's this financial cost that you are paying in essentially to redeem them. So there's the assumption that Jephthah could have done that. It's not the exact same situation, but it really seems to be a clear connection that for something that is vowed that should not be killed or sacrificed, that there's a way to get that back. And it seems voluntary as well. Like if somebody does not want to do the thing that is vowed, then they can take this other avenue where they can make a payment. I'm talking a lot on that. Anyhow, that's one of them. The other one briefly comes from Leviticus 5 verses 4 through 6. And just has to do with somebody makes a rash oath, like an unwise oath, and fails to carry it out. And they are guilty and they must bring a sin offering.
See, and I think that one matches up to me, like
Once
perfect,
perfect,
like
once
perfectly,
before
like
and
that's
after.
what that is, like, yeah.
Yeah, once Jephthah realized that he had made the rash vow, presumably either one would have been open to him, but he doesn't take either one. And so this leads into the second part of your question, which is, did she really die?
Yeah.
Now, there is a view, and I think it's a minority view, that Jephthah's daughter was not actually killed, sacrificed, but that she was redeemed. And there's the reasoning for that, briefly, is that the extent of the language around her death is assumed, right? It is that Jephthah, carried out the vow that he promised or something like that. And so you're making an assumption there. And they go, okay, well, that's not super clear what's going on, supposedly. The second part is that she's mourning her virginity. And some people think that, man, there was a way for her to, like, why is she mourning that specifically? That's said multiple times. Is this have to do with, a different kind? Maybe she needs to go and be dedicated to a priest and live a life of perpetual virginity, basically be celibate. And that's what she's mourning. And she has to be sent away. Is that she's saying bye to all of her friends for 2 months? So my response to that is, I think that she was sadly killed by her father. And the reason why is, one, I don't think he fulfilled the vow that he promised or whatever the language is. I don't really think it's that ambiguous. I think it's the vow that he specifically makes is that he's going to sacrifice a burnt offering and it's going to be her. And so it's a harder argument to make, I believe, that sentence means something other than what is straightforward in the text. But the other part is these women at the very end of chapter 11 who are, depends on the translation, but are commemorating, mourning, lamenting.
You don't lament someone who was spared.
Yeah, it seems odd that they would have this annual 4-day thing of remembrance
That's a big deal.
for somebody who's walking around and alive.
Or living in a convent or with a priest or
So
whatever.
to say,
Yeah.
So I think part of it is it makes people uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable. It's a
It
really
makes
sad
me
story.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, and naturally there's the question of God hates this. We've said God hates this.
Yeah.
Why would he not stop Jephthah? Where is God present in this story? God stopped Abraham from sacrificing Isaac. Where's the ram in the thicket here?
But God didn't tell Jephthah to. He didn't tell him to sacrifice him.
Yeah, that's true.
No, and so you go, what's going on here? Well, God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. Jephthah said he was going to do this on his own.
He just did it on his own.
Though God hates it, I think we could all pretty clearly see that there are a lot of things that God hates or despises that he doesn't stop humans from exercising their free will to accomplish.
He knew God, but he clearly was not in close relationship with him when he made that vow. So
I would say I did deliver the message on Sunday. Chooses a path. And I want to acknowledge that there are some other voices that say, well, maybe this, but I tried to choose the path that I think makes the most sense and is the most faithful to the text. But it does leave questions about what's going on.
And the big takeaway and the application points don't really change.
Yeah, they really don't. I mean, it's still the whole point about him knowing, loving God deeply and knowing God poorly is expressed through the fact that he makes this rash vow, not the the following through of that vow. That just makes the story sadder, frankly.
Yeah.
Okay, so we get to party with Samson for a couple weeks.
Samson, yeah.
And then we continue our descent into Judges.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Don't worry, folks. Easter will be here in just a few
Yeah,
weeks.
that's right. We'll wrap up Judges on Palm Sunday, and then we'll roll into Easter. So
Very good. Wow, good conversation.
Yeah.
This is a hard one. All right, thank you so much for sticking with us, for watching. We will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the TBC Extra Podcast. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.